I signed the contract with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. $4,500 a month to clean a mansion in Westridge Heights. Westridge Heights was a gated pocket tucked into the Palisades, high enough to watch Manhattan glitter on clear nights, and close enough that dawn drives to campus felt almost sane. The pen felt heavy, like I was signing away more than just my time. The woman across from me, Miss Castillo, watched with dark eyes that missed nothing. She was somewhere in her 50s, dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed old money and older secrets. Her silver-streaked hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. "You understand the terms, Miss Reed?" Her accent wrapped around each word with careful precision. "Discretion is paramount in this household. What you see, what you hear, stays within these walls." I nodded, thinking of the hospital bills stacked on my kitchen counter. $180,000. That's what cancer treatment cost, when insurance decided your mother wasn't worth saving. That's what I still owed, even though she'd been dead for 6 months. "I understand." "Good. You'll start Monday. 7 in the morning, sharp." That had been 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks of polishing marble floors that reflected my anxious face back at me. 2 weeks of dusting artwork worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime. 2 weeks of trying to be invisible in a house where cameras watched from every corner and men with guns stood at every entrance. The mansion itself was beautiful in a cold, untouchable way. 3 stories of stone and glass, surrounded by grounds that seemed to stretch forever. Inside, everything gleamed. Dark wood furniture, leather sofas that probably cost as much as a car, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over manicured gardens, and, beyond them, the city spread out like a carpet of lights. I'd met the owner exactly twice. Matteo Ricchetti, 34 years old, which Ms. Castillo had mentioned when showing me around, like his age mattered for my job. He was the kind of handsome that made you nervous rather than comfortable. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair and eyes so dark they looked black too. A thin scar traced along his jaw on the right side, the kind of mark that came from a blade, not an accident. The first time we'd met, he'd looked at me for exactly 3 seconds. That was all. 3 seconds where those eyes assessed me like I was a chess piece he was deciding whether to keep or discard. Then he'd nodded once and left the room. The second time, I'd been cleaning his study. He'd walked in while I was dusting the bookshelves, startling me so badly I'd nearly dropped the leather-bound volume in my hands. It was in a language I didn't recognize. Everything about him was quiet, controlled. He moved like water, silent and inevitable. "Miss Reed." His voice was lower than I expected, with an accent that softened some words and sharpened others. "Mr. Ricchetti, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you needed the study. I can come back later. Finish your work." He'd sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and proceeded to ignore my existence so completely I wondered if I'd become invisible. I'd finished dusting in record time, my shoulders tight with tension, hyper-aware of every movement I made. The whole time, he never looked up. Not once. That should have been my first real warning. A man who could make you disappear just by willing it. I lived with my sister Sophia in a 2-bedroom apartment across town. She was 16, all sharp edges and sharper tongue, trying to be tough in a world that kept kicking us down. School, homework, normal teenage things. That's what I wanted for her. What I needed to provide. Every morning I left before she woke up, catching 2 buses to reach Westridge Heights. Every evening I returned after dark, exhausted and aching, to help her with algebra and pretend I wasn't drowning. "How's the fancy job?" she'd asked last week, sprawled on our thrift store couch with her physics textbook. "It's fine. Good pay, quiet work." She'd given me that look teenagers perfected, the one that said they knew you were lying but were too tired to call you on it. "You look scared all the time now." "I'm not scared, just busy." That had been a lie, too. I was terrified. Of losing this job. Of the bills piling up. Of failing the one person I had left. Sophia deserved better than this. Better than me struggling to keep us afloat. But the truth was worse than general fear. The truth was that I'd started noticing things at the Ricchetti mansion. Things that made my skin crawl, and my instincts scream to run. The men who visited weren't businessmen. Not in any legitimate sense. They arrived in expensive cars with tinted windows, wearing suits that looked normal until you noticed the bulges under their jackets. They spoke in low voices, conversations cutting off the moment I entered a room. Sometimes they spoke in languages I didn't understand, Italian or Russian or something else entirely. Lucas was one of them, 40 years old, built like he'd spent his life in fights, with a scar that ran from his ear down his neck. He was Mateo's right hand, always there, always watching. He'd been polite to me exactly once when Miss Castillo had introduced us. "Welcome to the household, Miss Reed. You need anything, you let me know." After that, he'd treated me like furniture. Useful, forgettable, replaceable. Then came the night that changed everything. It was my 11th day on the job. I'd stayed late because the dinner service had run long, important guests who'd left the dining room a disaster. By the time I finished cleaning, it was past 10. The house felt different at night. Shadows deeper and sounds sharper. I was heading toward the service entrance when I heard voices from the back gardens. Angry voices, one pleading. Against every instinct screaming at me to keep walking, I moved toward the kitchen window that overlooked the grounds. The garden lights were off, but the moon was full and bright. I could see them clearly. 4 men standing in a loose circle. 3 I recognized as security, though calling them that felt like a sick joke. The 4th was on his knees, hands bound behind his back. Mateo stood in front of the kneeling man, calm as if he were discussing the weather. Lucas beside him, one hand resting casually on his hip, too casually, the kind of casual that hid a weapon. The kneeling man was speaking in Russian, words tumbling over each other, desperate and thick with fear. I didn't need to understand the language to know he was begging for his life. Mateo said something back. Just a few words, quiet and final. Then he pulled a gun from inside his jacket. I should have looked away, should have run, should have done anything except stand there frozen, watching through the window as Mateo raised the weapon. The sound was muffled by the glass, but still unmistakable. A sharp crack that seemed to echo in my bones. The man crumpled. Nothing but dead weight hitting the ground. My hand flew to my mouth, smothering the gasp trying to escape. My whole body shook. This wasn't some crime show on TV. This was real. Blood spreading dark across the grass. A man dead in the garden of the house where I worked. Mateo holstered his gun, said something to Lucas. They were already moving, efficient and practiced, when Mateo turned, looked directly at the kitchen window, directly at me. Our eyes met across the distance. Even in the moonlight, I could see the calculating look on his face. He knew. He knew I'd seen everything. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet, grabbed my bag from the staff room with shaking hands, and fled through the service entrance. Didn't stop moving until I was 3 blocks away, standing at the bus stop in the dark, trying to remember how to breathe. He knew I'd witnessed a murder. He knew exactly who I was, where I lived, probably everything about me. And he'd let me leave anyway. That night, I didn't sleep. Stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, listening to Sophia's quiet breathing from across the hall, wondering what I'd gotten us into, wondering if I'd wake up to find men at our door, wondering if leaving the mansion had been the last mistake I'd ever make. But morning came. No men. No consequences. Just my alarm going off at 5:30 and the suffocating realization that I had to go back. Because what choice did I have? Quit? And explain why? Go to the police and tell them what I'd seen? That felt like a faster way to end up dead. Besides, I had no proof. No evidence except my word against a man who clearly had enough power and money to make problems disappear. Including me. So I went back, caught my 2 buses, walked through the gates that suddenly felt like they were closing behind me instead of opening ahead. Ms. Castillo greeted me the same as always, gave me the day's task list, didn't mention anything being wrong. The next 3 days were torture. Every time a door opened, I flinched. Every time someone walked into a room I was cleaning, my heart raced. I waited for Mateo to call me into his study and tell me I knew too much. Waited for Lucas to corner me in a hallway. Waited for the other shoe to drop. It never did. Mateo continued to ignore my existence. Passed me in hallways without acknowledgement. Sat at breakfast while I served coffee and acted like I wasn't there. The only difference was that sometimes I'd catch him watching me. Quick glances when he thought I wouldn't notice. Assessment in those dark eyes. He was deciding what to do with me. I knew that with absolute certainty. By the end of the second week, a new terror had settled in my chest, cold and permanent. I couldn't quit. Couldn't explain to Sophia why we suddenly had no income. Couldn't risk him thinking I was running to the authorities. But I couldn't keep working here either. Trapped in the house of a murderer, waiting for him to decide I was a liability. That's when the idea came to me. Desperate, maybe stupid, but the only way out I could see. I had to make him fire me. If I was incompetent, useless, more trouble than I was worth, maybe he'd just let me go, cut his losses. It wasn't like housekeepers were hard to replace. I'd be beneath his notice, too insignificant to bother eliminating. So in my third week, I started making mistakes. Nothing huge at first. Forgot to dust the second-floor library. Left streaks on the windows in the east wing. Overcooked the vegetables at dinner. Ms. Castillo noticed immediately, called me into her office with a disappointed frown. "Your work has been excellent until now, Miss Reed. Is something wrong?" "No, ma'am. I'm sorry. I've been tired. It won't happen again." But it did. The next day, I broke a vase while dusting. Nothing priceless, just expensive. Maybe $800 worth of pottery shattered across marble floors. I apologized profusely, offered to have it deducted from my pay. Ms. Castillo's lips thinned. "This is becoming a pattern." "I know. I'm so sorry." Through it all, Mateo said nothing. Didn't react when Ms. Castillo surely reported my failures. Didn't comment when I burned the toast at breakfast. Something so simple a child could manage it. Just sat there reading his newspaper, sipping his coffee, while I fumbled my way through tasks I'd been doing perfectly 2 weeks ago. But I caught those looks again. The brief glances, dark eyes tracking my movements. And this time, I saw something new in them. Amusement. He knew exactly what I was doing. By my 4th week at the Richetti mansion, I'd moved from subtle mistakes to blatant disasters. The careful incompetence wasn't working. Mateo hadn't fired me. Hadn't even reprimanded me directly. Just those knowing looks that made my skin crawl, like he was enjoying some private joke at my expense. So I decided to force his hand. One catastrophic day that would make keeping me on staff impossible. It started at breakfast. Mateo sat at the head of the dining table with 3 associates, all dressed in dark suits that probably cost more than my car. They were deep in conversation, switching between English and Italian, voices low and serious. I recognized Lucas among them, his scarred neck visible above his collar. I carried the coffee pot with deliberately unsteady hands, approached Mateo's chair, tilted the pot just slightly too far. Hot coffee splashed across his crisp white shirt, spreading in a dark stain across his chest and shoulder. The conversation stopped instantly. All 4 men turned to stare at me. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, grabbing napkins and making it worse by pressing them against the stain. "I don't know what happened. I'm so clumsy today." Mateo caught my wrist. His grip was firm but didn't hurt, his dark eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't read. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then he released me. "It's fine, Miss Reed." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Accidents happen." He stood, excused himself to change, and left the room without another word. The other men watched him go, then returned to their conversation like nothing had occurred. Lucas glanced at me once, something almost like pity crossing his face before he looked away. Ms. Castillo found me in the kitchen 10 minutes later, her expression stormy. "That shirt was custom-made Italian silk. Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." It better not. But she didn't fire me. Didn't even threaten to. Just turned on her heel and left. 2 hours later, I executed phase 2. Mateo needed to leave for an important meeting downtown. I'd overheard him telling Lucas it couldn't be delayed. The black SUV sat in the circular driveway, engine running, driver waiting. I'd been tasked with retrieving Mateo's briefcase from his study. Instead, I palmed the spare keys from the kitchen key rack. Walked to the SUV while the driver was distracted talking to security. Reached through the open window, pressed the lock button, and let the keys fall to the floor inside. The click of the locks engaging was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Mateo appeared 5 minutes later, briefcase in hand, ready to leave. The driver tried the door. Locked. Tried the other doors. All locked. The keys visible through the window, mocking us. Who locked the vehicle? The driver's face had gone pale. I think I did. I stepped forward, wringing my hands. I was cleaning the interior earlier and must have hit the button by accident when I got out. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Mateo stood perfectly still, watching me. That same calculating look, like he was solving an equation in his head. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, and arranged for another car. The whole time, his eyes never left my face. 30-minute delay now. Lucas muttered to him. I'm aware. They left in a different vehicle. I waited for the axe to fall, for Ms. Castillo to storm out and fire me on the spot. But the afternoon passed in tense silence. No consequences, no confrontation. Just the weight of what I'd done settling in my stomach like lead. That evening, Mateo was hosting dinner for 6 associates. Important people, from the way the house staff had been preparing all day. I'd been assigned to help serve. The dining room gleamed. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light, sending rainbows across the white tablecloth. The first course went smoothly. The second course? Fine. Then came dessert. I'd spent an hour that afternoon in the kitchen, helping prepare the elaborate chocolate torte, when the chef stepped away to check on something. I switched the containers of sugar and salt. Simple. Devastating. The first guest to taste it made a face, setting down his fork immediately. The second did the same. By the third, everyone had stopped eating, confusion and disgust rippling around the table. Is something wrong with the dessert? Ms. Castillo appeared from nowhere, her professional mask slipping into alarm. One of the guests, a heavy-set man with a thick accent, pushed his plate away. This is inedible. What kind of establishment are you running here? Mateo tasted his own serving. Set down his fork with deliberate care. His jaw tightened, the only sign of anger. But when he looked up at me, something dark and knowing flickered in his eyes. My apologies, gentlemen. Kitchen error. We'll have fresh dessert sent up from the bakery in town. Please have more wine while we wait. He stood, gestured to me. Miss Reed, a word in my study. Now. My heart dropped into my shoes. This was it. I'd finally pushed too far. I followed him down the hallway, acutely aware of Lucas trailing behind us like a shadow. The study door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Outside, storm clouds had been gathering all day. Now rain began to fall, light at first, then building to a downpour that hammered against the windows. I'd left several upstairs windows open earlier, deliberately creating more work and chaos. Now my clothes were damp from running around trying to close them all, hair sticking to my face, probably looking as desperate as I felt. Mateo moved to the window, standing with his back to me, hands in his pockets. On his desk sat a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. Scotch, probably. The kind that cost more than my weekly salary. Do you think I'm stupid, Miss Reed? The question hung in the air like a blade. I opened my mouth, closed it. What could I possibly say? He turned to face me. In the dim light of the study, with lightning flashing behind him, he looked dangerous. Not in the way he'd looked in the garden with a gun in his hand. This was different. More controlled. More terrifying. The vase you broke 3 days ago. He continued, his voice soft and deadly. You have a degree in veterinary science, which requires steady hands and precision. Yet suddenly you're clumsy with a simple ceramic vase. I said nothing. The burned toast, the forgotten dusting, the streaked windows, all within days of each other after 2 weeks of flawless work. He took a step closer. This morning's coffee incident. Interesting timing right as we were discussing sensitive business. The locked car. We were already running late for a meeting that cost me a significant deal because of the delay. Another step. I backed up until the desk pressed against my spine. And tonight's dessert. His voice dropped even lower. Salt instead of sugar. Such a simple mistake for someone who's been cooking for herself and a younger sister for years. He knew about Sophia. Of course he knew. He probably knew everything. I can explain. Don't insult my intelligence with lies. He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and woodsy. You've been trying to get fired. Systematically. Desperately. The question is why? Thunder rolled overhead. Rain lashed the windows. I was trapped between his body and the desk, with nowhere to run and no more lies left. You saw something. It wasn't a question. 2 weeks ago. The gardens. You witnessed something that scared you badly enough to sabotage your own employment rather than simply quit. My breath came short and fast. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd seen me at the window that night. I don't want any trouble, I whispered. I just want to leave. Forget everything. Pretend I never saw anything. And you think I can allow that? He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he was solving. You think I can let you walk out of here with knowledge that could destroy everything I've built? Either you're very naive or very desperate. Both, I admitted. Because what did it matter now? I'm both. I need this job. I need the money. But I can't work here knowing what I know. So I tried to make you fire me. That way, it's not my choice. It's not suspicious. I just couldn't do the job. That's all. Clever. He reached past me, picked up the tumbler of scotch, took a slow sip. Foolish, but clever. You understand the situation you're in, yes? You're a witness to something that never happened. That body was found 3 towns over, the victim of a gang dispute. Official police reports will confirm this. But you could complicate things. Make noise. Draw attention. I won't. The words rushed out. I swear. I'll never tell anyone. I'll forget I ever saw anything. Forgive me if I don't trust your word alone. He set down the glass. Here's what's going to happen, Miss Reed. You're going to stop these ridiculous attempts at self-sabotage. You're going to work here properly for the next year minimum. In exchange, I'm going to do something for you. I stared at him, confused. You have medical debt. $180,000 from your mother's cancer treatment. Collections agencies have been calling you weekly. You're 2 months behind on rent for that apartment you share with your 16-year-old sister, Sophia. She goes to Lincoln High School, walks home every day at 3:15, stops at the corner store for a soda and candy twice a week. My blood turned to ice. He knew where Sophia went to school, knew her schedule. Don't. My voice cracked. Please. She has nothing to do with this, which is why nothing will happen to her. His tone softened slightly. I'm not a monster, Hannah. I don't hurt children, but I need you to understand the stakes here. You stay. You work. You keep your mouth shut. In exchange, those medical debts disappear. Completely. Paid in full within the week. Your rent gets current. Your salary increases to $6,500 a month. Sophia gets extra security walking to and from school, whether she notices it or not. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Why would you do that? Because it's cheaper than eliminating a problem. He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. Because loyalty bought is often more reliable than loyalty coerced. And because despite your attempt to sabotage yourself, you're actually quite good at your job when you're not actively trying to fail at it. He moved away, giving me space to breathe again. Returned to the window, watching the storm. $180,000 in debt. Gone. Stable income. Your sister's safe and provided for. All you have to do is clean my house and forget you ever looked out a window on a Tuesday night. He glanced back at me. Seems like a fair trade. It wasn't a trade. It was a cage. A beautiful, well-paid cage, but still a cage. And he'd just told me he knew exactly where my sister was at any given time. If I refuse, then you leave tonight with nothing. The debt remains. Sophia remains vulnerable. And I take my chances that you're too afraid of the consequences to talk. He turned fully to face me. But we both know you won't refuse. You came here desperate for money to protect your sister. That hasn't changed. The only difference now is that I'm offering you more than you could have hoped for. He was right. I hated that he was right. One more thing. His voice dropped to something dark and final. If you betray my trust, if you speak to anyone about what you've seen or what you know, the consequences won't fall on you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Sophia. He was talking about Sophia. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I understand. Good. Then we have an agreement. He picked up a folder from his desk, handed it to me. Inside were documents, bank transfers, everything he'd promised. Your debts will be cleared by Friday. The salary increase starts Monday. Welcome to the family, Hannah Reed. The way he said it made family sound like a life sentence. I took the folder with shaking hands, nodded, and fled the study. Ran through the rain to the service entrance, got to my car, and sat there in the dark with the folder on my lap. I'd tried to escape. Instead, I'd bound myself tighter than before. The arrangement changed everything, and nothing at all. My debts vanished within 3 days, exactly as Matteo promised. $180,000, gone like they'd never existed. My bank account showed the increased salary. Sophia's school added extra security without her knowledge. A black sedan that followed her route home from a distance. I kept my end of the bargain, worked efficiently, kept my mouth shut, pretended the night in the garden had never happened. But working efficiently meant being present, visible, and Matteo noticed. Week 5 started with him intercepting me in the hallway outside his study. I'd been carrying fresh linens to the guest suites, my arms full of Egyptian cotton that probably cost more per sheet than my old monthly rent. Miss Reed. A moment. I stopped, turned, waited. He stood in the doorway of his study, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loosened. It was late afternoon, golden light slanting through the windows behind him. How is your sister adjusting to the new school year? The question caught me off guard. She's fine. Thank you for asking. 16 is a difficult age, especially without parents. Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. Not pity exactly. Understanding maybe. We manage. I'm sure you do. He paused, like he was deciding whether to say more. If she needs anything. Tutoring, supplies, college planning, let me know. That's not necessary. Consider it an investment in employee retention. But the way he said it, almost gentle, didn't match the cold business logic of the words. I nodded, unsure how to respond, and continued down the hallway. Behind me, I heard his study door close with a soft click. That became the pattern. Small conversations, never longer than a few minutes. Always when no one else was around. He'd ask about Sophia's classes, about my veterinary studies that I'd abandoned, about books I'd read, never about the night in the garden, never about the arrangement between us. I answered briefly, politely, keeping walls firmly in place, but I started noticing things. The way he treated the household staff with respect, never raising his voice or making demands. How he paid everyone above market rate, provided health insurance, gave Christmas bonuses that were actually substantial. Ms. Castillo ran the house, but it was Matteo who'd established the culture of dignity for the people who worked for him. I found receipts in his study once while cleaning. Donations to 3 different orphanages across the city. Monthly contributions that added up to more than I'd made in a year at my old job. When I asked Ms. Castillo about it later, trying to sound casual, she'd given me a long look. Mr. Ricchetti grew up in the system. He doesn't forget where he came from. The library in the East Wing held hundreds of books, and they weren't just for show. I'd seen him reading there late at night when I worked evening shifts. Genuine worn paperbacks mixed with leather-bound classics. Philosophy, history, Italian literature in the original language. He had a mind that craved knowledge, not just power. It confused me. Made the monster from the garden harder to reconcile with the man who asked about my sister's algebra homework. Then came the 6th week, and everything shifted again. I was leaving through the service entrance, later than usual after helping prepare for a small dinner party. The sun had already set, security lights casting harsh shadows across the driveway. That's when I heard it. Whimpering, weak and pained, coming from near the front gates. I should have kept walking. Should have told security. Should have done anything except investigate alone in the dark. Instead, I followed the sound. The dog was small, maybe a terrier mix, huddled against the stone wall near the gate's electronic panel. Blood matted its fur on one side, a gash across its ribs that looked deep. Its brown eyes watched me approach. Too hurt to run, too scared to trust. Hey, sweetheart. I kept my voice low, soothing. Crouched slowly, letting it smell my hand. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Years of veterinary training kicked in automatically. I assessed the wound, deep but not fatal if treated soon. Checked for broken bones, found none. The dog was malnourished, probably a stray, but young, maybe 2 years old. I didn't think. Just scooped the dog carefully into my arms, mindful of its injuries, and carried it toward the house. It whimpered but didn't struggle, like it knew I was trying to help. Security tried to stop me at the door. "Miss Reed, you can't bring that inside. It's injured. It needs help." I pushed past them, heading for the kitchen where I knew there was a first aid kit. My shirt was already soaked with blood, the dog trembling against my chest. I was halfway through cleaning the wound when Mateo appeared in the kitchen doorway. He didn't say anything, just watched as I worked, my hands steady despite my racing heart, talking to the dog in a low voice while I disinfected the gash and applied butterfly bandages to close it. Not perfect, but it would hold until I could get the animal to a real vet. "You're good at that." His voice made me jump. I'd almost forgotten he was there. I was studying to be a veterinarian. Before my mother got sick, before the bills, before everything fell apart. I remember. Of course he did. He knew everything about me. The dog had calmed under my hands, the worst of the crisis past. It looked up at me with those trusting brown eyes, tail giving a weak wag. It needs proper veterinary care. Antibiotics, stitches probably. I can take it to a clinic tomorrow. Keep it here. I looked up at him, surprised. "What?" "The dog. Keep it here. I'll have Lucas arrange for a vet to come to the property tomorrow morning. Set up a space in the mudroom for now." He moved closer, studying the animal with genuine interest. "What will you call it?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "Dodger. Because it probably dodged death tonight." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Appropriate. I'll have supplies delivered as well. Food, bed, toys. Whatever it needs." "You don't have to." "I want to." He met my eyes directly. "You came alive just now. Actually passionate about something for the first time since you started working here. That's worth keeping around." Heat crept up my neck. I looked back at the dog to avoid his gaze. Thank you, Miss Reed, for reminding me that not everything has to be about business." He left before I could respond, already pulling out his phone to make arrangements. I sat there on the kitchen floor with a dog in my lap, blood on my shirt, completely bewildered by Matteo Ricchetti. Over the next week, Dodger became part of the household. The vet pronounced him in good health after treatment. He followed me everywhere during my shifts, settling in whatever room I was cleaning, thumping his tail whenever I looked his way. The other staff fell in love with him immediately, even Ms. Castillo, who I'd assumed hated animals, snuck him treats when she thought no one was watching, and Matteo, surprisingly, seemed to enjoy having the dog around. I'd catch him scratching Dodger's ears while reading in the library, or letting the animal curl up under his desk during meetings. "He's good for the household," he told me one morning. "Softens the edges." I started calling Sophia every Sunday evening from the mansion's landline, a habit Matteo had suggested when I mentioned my cell phone bill was getting expensive from the long calls. He'd waved away my protests about using his phone. "Family is important, Miss Reed. Call whenever you need to." Sophia always asked the same question. "Are you happy there?" "Yes." I'd lie. Because what else could I say? That I was trapped? That I knew too much? That the man who paid my salary had threatened her to ensure my silence? But the lie started feeling less like a lie as weeks passed. Because despite everything, despite the arrangement and the fear and the knowledge of what Matteo was capable of, I was finding moments of something close to contentment. Working with my hands, caring for Dodger, seeing Sophia safe and thriving with the financial pressure lifted. Then week 7 brought new complications. I was serving afternoon tea in Matteo's study when they arrived. 3 men in dark suits, but not the usual Italian associates. These men had different energy, cold and predatory in a way that made my skin crawl. They spoke in Russian, which I didn't understand, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. Matteo's posture changed the moment they entered. Shoulders back, jaw tight, every line of his body radiating controlled threat. Lucas stood by the door like a guard dog, one hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. I set down the tea service quickly, trying to be invisible, when one of the Russians spoke to Matteo in English. Sergio Valentasi sends his regards. He's very interested in your territory. My territory is not for sale. Everything is for sale, Mr. Ricchetti. It's just a question of price. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sergio is prepared to be very generous. Tell Sergio that if he wants this territory, he'll have to take it. And that won't end well for him. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I finished pouring tea and retreated as fast as professionally possible, heart hammering. Behind me, I heard the Russian laugh, low and threatening. We'll see about that. That night, Matteo called a meeting with all his senior people. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I was cleaning the hallway outside the conference room when raised voices carried through the door. The Yakuza backing Sergio changes everything, Lucas was saying. We can't fight them both. We don't have a choice. Matteo's voice was steel. If we show weakness now, we're finished. Increase security at all properties. Double the guards. I want everyone on high alert. What about the people in the house? Staff, I mean. A pause. Keep them safe. They're not part of this war. I moved away before they could catch me listening, but the weight of what I'd heard followed me home that night. War was coming, and I was standing right in the middle of the battlefield. The mansion transformed into a fortress over the next 2 weeks. More guards patrolled the grounds, their presence constant and unsettling. Cameras multiplied like eyes, watching every corner. The household staff moved through their duties with new tension, aware that something dangerous was brewing beyond the gates. Matteo held more meetings behind closed doors, voices raised in Italian and English, arguments about strategy and territory. Lucas was always at his side, hand never far from the weapon under his jacket. The other men who visited had that same quality, predatory and alert, ready for violence at any moment. I tried to stay invisible, focus on my work, pretend the escalating danger didn't exist. But it was impossible to ignore. The air itself felt charged, like the moments before lightning strikes. Sophia called more frequently now, worried because she'd seen news reports about gang violence in the city, bodies found in abandoned buildings, shootings outside nightclubs, territorial disputes turning bloody. Are you safe where you work? She asked one evening, her voice tight with concern. I'm fine. The neighborhood here is really secure. You don't need to worry about me. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? The lie stuck in my throat. Of course I would, but I wouldn't. Couldn't. Because telling Sophia the truth meant admitting I worked for a man who operated outside the law, who had enemies willing to kill, who'd threatened her to ensure my silence. Better she thought I was cleaning some rich businessman's mansion in a safe part of town. Week 9 arrived with unseasonable heat, the kind that made the air shimmer and tempers run short. I was in the kitchen preparing afternoon tea when the alarm system blared through the house. 3 sharp tones, then Lucas's voice over the intercom. Lockdown. All non-essential personnel to safe rooms. Now. My hands froze on the teapot. Ms. Castillo burst into the kitchen, her professional calm finally cracking. Come with me quickly. She grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the pantry. Behind a false wall was a reinforced room, stocked with supplies and communications equipment. 2 other staff members were already inside, faces pale with fear. Stay here. Don't come out until someone gives the all clear. She left before I could ask what was happening. The heavy door closed with a thud that made my ears pop. We waited in tense silence. Minutes crawled past. I could hear sounds through the walls, muffled but distinct. Shouting, breaking glass, then gunshots, sharp cracks that made us all flinch. One of the staff members, a young man named David who worked as a groundskeeper, started pacing. They're inside. They got inside the house. Security will handle it, the cook, Mrs. Park, said. But her hands shook as she clutched her rosary. More gunshots. Closer now. Someone screamed, the sound cutting off abruptly. I thought about Dodger. Where was he? Was he safe? The dog usually followed me everywhere, but I'd left him in the mudroom when the alarm went off. Time stopped having meaning. Could have been 10 minutes or an hour before the sounds finally stopped. Heavy silence settled, somehow worse than the noise. Then footsteps outside the safe room. I held my breath. Clear. Everyone out. It's over. Lucas's voice. We emerged cautiously into a kitchen that looked like a war zone. Chairs overturned, broken dishes scattered across the floor, bullet holes in the far wall. Lucas stood in the doorway, blood on his shirt but apparently uninjured. His eyes were hard, scanning each of us quickly. Anyone hurt? We shook our heads. Good. Stay in the East Wing until we've cleaned up. Don't go near the entrance or the gardens. What happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sergio Valentasi's people. They breached security during shift change. Won't happen again. He turned to leave, and I saw bodies being dragged past the kitchen door. 3 men in dark clothing, clearly dead. My stomach turned. Where's Mr. Ricchetti? Mrs. Park asked. Out. He'll be back soon. Until then, follow my instructions. We did as told, gathering in one of the guest suites in the East Wing. Nobody spoke. We just sat there, processing what had just happened. An actual assault on the house. People dead in the hallways we walked through every day. Dodger found me an hour later, whimpering and pressing against my legs. I gathered him into my arms, feeling his heart race against my chest. At least he was safe. Matteo returned as the sun was setting. I heard his voice in the hallway, sharp and controlled but edged with fury. He was speaking to Lucas, words too low for me to catch clearly. Then footsteps, moving through the house, checking each room. He appeared in the doorway of the guest suite. His eyes swept over us, counting, assessing for injuries. You're all unharmed? Nods all around. His gaze landed on me last and lingered. Something passed across his face, too quick to identify. Relief, maybe. Or anger that I'd been put in danger. Miss Reed, a word. I followed him into the hallway, Dodger trailing behind. We walked in silence to his study. That familiar space that had become the site of so many turning points in my time here. He poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow, poured another. His hand shook slightly, the only sign of how close things had been. They came for me, he said finally. Planned the attack during shift change because they'd been watching the security patterns. 3 men made it inside before we could stop them. Lucas said it was Sergio's people. Yes, a message? Show weakness, invite more attacks, show strength. He trailed off, jaw tight. They're all dead now. The ones who came here and the cell that gave the order? I should have been horrified. Part of me was. But another part, the part that had been living in this world for 9 weeks now, just felt relief that it was over. You could have been killed, he continued, setting down his glass to face me fully. You and the others. Because of me. Because I brought this war to my own home. It's not your fault. It is. He moved closer, and I saw genuine guilt in his eyes. You work here because I forced you to, because I gave you no choice. And today you almost died for it. But I didn't. I'm fine. You're trembling. I looked down at my hands. He was right. I'd been holding it together, but now that the adrenaline was fading, my body was catching up to what had happened. Come here. He guided me to the leather chair, made me sit, poured a small amount of whiskey into a clean glass and pressed it into my hands. Drink. It'll help with the shock. I took a sip, coughed as it burned down my throat. He crouched in front of me, hands resting on the chair arms, boxing me in but not threatening. Protective. I'm moving you to the suite next to mine. 2nd floor, East Wing. Higher security, reinforced doors, panic button directly linked to my phone. That's not necessary. It is. I won't risk this again. His voice dropped lower. I can't. The way he said it made my breath catch. This wasn't about strategy or protecting an asset. This was personal. Hannah. He rarely used my first name. It always made me pay attention. Look at me. I met his eyes. Dark and intense, searching my face for something. If anything had happened to you today. He stopped, jaw working. You matter. Not because you're useful or because you know things. You matter. The vulnerability in those words hit harder than any threat he'd ever made. Matteo Ricchetti, who killed without hesitation, who commanded an empire built on violence, was telling me I mattered to him. I don't understand, I whispered. Neither do I. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But it doesn't change the truth. You'll move tonight. Non-negotiable. He stood, offering me his hand. I took it, letting him pull me to my feet. His fingers lingered on mine, warm and solid. Get some rest. Lucas will bring your things to the new suite. I'll have dinner sent up. You don't need to work for the rest of today. Thank you. He walked me to the door, and Dodger immediately pressed against my leg. Mateo reached down to scratch the dog's ears, a rare moment of softness. Take care of her, Dodger. That's your job now. The new suite was beautiful. Larger than any space I'd ever lived in, with windows overlooking the gardens and a bathroom that felt like a spa. My belongings looked lost in the massive walk-in closet, but what struck me most was the door on the far wall. Locked, but I knew where it led. To Mateo's private rooms. We'd be separated by a single door. Close enough to hear if something went wrong. Close enough for other things too. Whispered a traitorous part of my brain. I pushed that thought away. This was about safety. Protection. Nothing more. That night, I lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like an intruder. Dodger slept at the foot of the bed, his presence comforting, but not enough to quiet my racing thoughts. Sophia had called earlier, voice tight with worry after seeing news about a shootout at an undisclosed location. I'd assured her I was nowhere near any trouble, that everything was fine. Another lie to add to the pile. Around midnight, I heard movement from Mateo's room. Footsteps, water running. The sound of someone who also couldn't sleep. I wondered if he was thinking about the attack, about the bodies in his house, about how close his people had come to being killed, about me. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. If you need anything, I'm here. Just knock. I stared at the message for a long time. Simple words that felt like so much more. An offer, an admission, a door opening between us, invisible but real. I typed back. Thank you. Good night. 3 dots appeared immediately. Good night, Hannah. You're safe here, I promise. And despite everything, despite the danger and the violence and the impossible situation I'd found myself in, I believed him. I was safe. Not because of the guards or the security system or the reinforced walls, because Matteo Ricchetti had decided I mattered, and nothing would be allowed to hurt what he'd claimed as his to protect. Living next door to Matteo changed everything in ways I hadn't anticipated. The proximity felt intimate even through walls and locked doors. I could hear him moving through his rooms late at night when neither of us could sleep, heard water running when he showered, heard the faint murmur of his voice during phone calls that stretched past midnight. He became less of an enigma and more of a person, a man with routines and habits, who paced when thinking, who listened to jazz at low volume while working, who sometimes stood at his window for long stretches staring out at the grounds like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Because he did. I saw it in the lines around his eyes that deepened after difficult meetings, in the tension that settled across his shoulders when Lucas brought bad news, in the way his jaw would tighten when discussing territorial disputes that had no good solutions. Week 11 brought a string of problems that tested even Mateo's legendary control. A shipment intercepted, 2 safe houses compromised, increasing pressure from rivals sensing weakness after the attack on the mansion. I watched him handle it all with ruthless efficiency, making decisions that probably cost lives, but kept his people protected. One evening I brought him dinner in his study, because he'd been locked in meetings all day, and Ms. Castillo was worried he hadn't eaten. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across his features. You didn't have to do this. You need to eat. I set the tray on the corner of his desk, careful not to disturb the documents spread across the surface. Even Mafia bosses require food occasionally. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Is that what you think I am? A Mafia boss? Isn't that what you are? He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those dark, unreadable eyes. It's more complicated than that. But yes, in the ways that matter, I suppose that's accurate. Then eat your dinner, Mr. Ricchetti. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Matteo, he corrected softly. When it's just us, call me Matteo. The use of his first name felt dangerous. like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But I nodded anyway. Matteo, then. Eat. He did, and I started to leave, but his voice stopped me. Stay. If you're not needed elsewhere, I could use the company. So I stayed. Sat in the chair across from his desk while he ate, and we talked about nothing important. Books we'd read, places we'd never been, Sophia's progress in school, safe topics that danced around everything real between us. But there was comfort in it, a strange domestic peace in that moment that felt stolen from some other, simpler life. That became our pattern. Late evenings when the house was quiet, he'd knock softly on our connecting door. I'd join him in his study, or we'd sit on the balcony off his room, watching the city lights and talking until exhaustion finally drove us to our separate beds. We never touched, never crossed that invisible line. But the air between us grew heavy with everything we weren't saying. Then came the nightmare. Week 11, night 3. I woke gasping, tangled in sheets soaked with sweat. In my dream, I'd been back in the kitchen during the attack. But this time the invaders had gotten to me before Lucas arrived. Rough hands grabbing, pulling. The flash of a knife. Pain exploding across my ribs. Sophia's screams in the distance as they dragged me away. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't separate dream from reality. My hands frantically checked my body for wounds that didn't exist, but the phantom pain felt real. Too real. The connecting door burst open. Matteo appeared with a gun in his hand, face hard and alert. He scanned the room in seconds, weapon trained on empty shadows, before his gaze locked on me huddled in bed. Hannah. He lowered the gun, set it carefully on the dresser. What happened? Nightmare. My voice came out broken. Just a nightmare. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize. He moved to the bed, sat on the edge carefully. The attack. You were dreaming about the attack. I nodded, still shaking. Dodger had jumped up beside me, pressing his warm body against mine. But even that wasn't enough to stop the tremors. Matteo reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his hand settled on my shoulder, warm and grounding. You're safe. They're gone. I made sure of it. I know. Logically, I know. But in the dream, I trailed off, unable to articulate the terror that still clung to me like a second skin. The mind doesn't always listen to logic. His thumb moved in small circles against my shoulder, the touch soothing. I still have nightmares about my father's death. 22 years later, and sometimes I wake up certain I'm still 12 years old, watching him bleed out on our kitchen floor. The confession shocked me into stillness. Matteo never spoke about his past. Not really. Just vague allusions to difficult beginnings. You were there when it happened? I found him after school. 2 bullets to the chest, 1 to the head. Professional hit, they said. Revenge for some deal gone wrong. His voice stayed steady, but his eyes darkened with old pain. I sat with him until he stopped breathing, held his hand while his blood soaked into my uniform. Matteo. I didn't know what to say. What words could possibly address that kind of trauma? My uncle Giuseppe took me in afterward. He was the one who introduced me to this life. Said I had a gift for strategy and violence. By 16, I was running collections. By 20, I'd earned my first kill. He looked at me directly. That's who I am, Hannah. That's the path I walked to get here. Built on loss and blood and choices I can't undo. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know. To understand that I'm not just the man who threatened you, or the one who pays your salary. I'm also the 12-year-old boy who lost everything and decided to become powerful enough that nothing could hurt me again. I reached up, covered his hand with mine. I lost my parents too. Sophia was 11, terrified and grieving. And suddenly I was responsible for everything. Had to drop out of veterinary school, take 3 jobs, figure out how to be parent and sibling and provider all at once. You were too young for that burden. So were you, for yours. Something passed between us in that moment. Recognition. Understanding. 2 people shaped by loss, doing whatever necessary to protect what remained. I'm afraid, I admitted quietly, not just of the danger or the violence. I'm afraid of this. Of feeling something for you when everything about this situation is wrong. when caring about you could destroy everything I've tried to build for Sophia. And I'm afraid, he said, voice dropping lower, that I've already fallen so far that losing you would break something in me I didn't know could still break. Then he was kissing me. Or I was kissing him. Later, I couldn't remember who moved first. Only that suddenly his mouth was on mine, and years of loneliness and fear and desperate want crashed together in that contact. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with unexpected tenderness. I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, drowning in the taste of him and the heat of his skin and the way he kissed like he was trying to memorize every second. It was intense and desperate and perfect, months of tension finally exploding between us. Until reality crashed back in, and I remembered Sophia, remembered the war brewing outside these walls, remembered that caring for Matteo meant becoming a target, a weakness, a liability. I pulled back, breathing hard. We can't. His forehead rested against mine, breath matching my ragged rhythm. I know. If something happens to you in this war with Sergio, I won't survive it. Not after... I couldn't finish the sentence. After losing everyone else I'd ever loved. Nothing will happen to me. You can't promise that. I forced myself to pull further away, putting physical distance between us. And worse, if this relationship puts Sophia in more danger, if it makes her a target because of me, I'd never forgive myself. Or you. His jaw tightened, pain flashing in his eyes. But he nodded. You're right. I don't like it, but you're right. I care about you. The admission cost me something to make. More than I should. More than is safe. But I can't let that cloud my judgment about what's best for my sister. I understand. He stood, moved toward the connecting door, then paused. For what it's worth, Hannah, you're not just someone I want. You're someone I'd choose. Equal, partner. The only person who makes this life feel like it means something beyond survival. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. He left, door closing softly behind him. I sat in my bed, fingers touching my lips where I could still feel his kiss, wondering how I'd found the strength to say no when every part of me had screamed yes. The following week, Sophia finally visited on a Saturday afternoon. I'd been putting it off, making excuses about schedules and homework, but Matteo had insisted. She should see where you work, know that you're safe and well cared for. Otherwise, she'll imagine the worst. So Sophia came, eyes wide as Lucas drove her through the gates in one of the black SUVs. I met her at the entrance, pulling her into a hug that lasted longer than necessary. This place is insane, she whispered. Is that gold on the doorframe? Gold leaf. And yes, it's excessive. Come on, I'll show you around. We toured the public areas, Sophia's running commentary a mix of awe and sarcasm that made me laugh for the first time in days. She loved the library, spent 20 minutes just running her fingers along the book spines. Adored Dodger on sight, sitting on the floor to let him crawl into her lap. You seem happy here, she said carefully as we sat in the garden. Different than before. Less stressed. The pay is good, the work is stable. And Mr. Ricchetti is... I searched for words that wouldn't reveal too much. He's been very generous. Mr. Ricchetti. She said it like she was testing the name. That's your boss, the one who pays for my school. I'd told her the scholarship came from a benefactor through my work. Not technically a lie. One of the people I work for, yes. Can I meet him? Before I could answer, Matteo appeared from the house. He must have been watching, waiting for the right moment. Dressed casually in jeans and a button-down with sleeves rolled up, he looked almost normal, almost safe. You must be Sophia. He approached with a warm expression, extending his hand. I've heard wonderful things about you. I'm Matteo. Sophia shook his hand, studying him with the same assessing look she gave everyone. Protective of me, always. Thank you for helping my sister. And for the school thing. Your sister works very hard. The assistance is well deserved. He glanced at me, then back to Sophia. She speaks about you constantly. How intelligent you are. How well you're doing in your classes. She's very proud of you. Something in Sophia's expression softened. She worries too much. That's what sisters do. He smiled genuinely. I never had siblings, but I imagine it's impossible not to worry about people you love. They talked for another 10 minutes, about school and her interest in engineering and whether she'd applied to any summer programs yet. Matteo was charming without being overbearing, respectful without being distant. He treated her like an intelligent young adult rather than a child, and I could see Sophia responding to that, her initial wariness melting into tentative liking. When she went inside to use the bathroom, Matteo turned to me. "She's remarkable. You've done an incredible job with her. She did most of the work herself. I just tried not to screw it up too badly. Hannah." He waited until I met his eyes. "About what I said that first night. The threat regarding Sophia. I need you to know that was me trying to control a situation through fear. It's what I know, what I'm good at. But I would never, under any circumstances, harm her. Even if you betrayed me tomorrow, even if you went to the police, even if you destroyed everything I've built, she would remain untouched. You have my word." The apology was so unexpected, so genuine, that I felt tears prick my eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know. She's innocent, a child." That line is one I don't cross, Hannah, not ever. When Sophia emerged, she gave me a meaningful look. "He's hot, just saying." "Sophia." "What? I'm 16, not blind." She grinned. "But also, he's nice. I like him. As your boss, I mean. He seems to really care about the people who work for him." We spent another hour at the mansion before Lucas drove Sophia home. I watched the SUV disappear down the driveway, a strange ache in my chest. That night, Matteo knocked on our connecting door. When I opened it, he leaned against the frame. "She gave me her approval, in case you were wondering." "How did you know?" "She told me before leaving. Said you deserved someone who treated you right, and that I seemed like I might be capable of that. Then she threatened very seriously to make my life hell if I hurt you." I laughed despite myself. "That sounds like Sophia. I promised her I would try my best not to hurt you, though I suspect I already have, in many ways. You saved us too. The debts, the security, the opportunity. It's complicated, but it's not all bad." He studied my face for a long moment. "One day this war will be over. Sergio will be dealt with, the territory secured, things will stabilize. When that day comes, if you're willing, I'd like to try this properly. Court you like you deserve. Not boss and employee, not captor and captive, just Matteo and Hannah. Would you give me that chance?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a promise, a commitment to something beyond our current circumstance. "Ask me again when the war is over. When Sophia is safe and you're not sleeping with a gun under your pillow. Ask me then, and we'll see." He smiled, slow and genuine. "That's not a no. It's not a yes either, but it's hope. I'll take it." He left me standing there, watching him retreat to his room, wondering how I'd gone from wanting to be fired to hoping for a future with the most dangerous man I'd ever met. The call came at 2 a.m. I heard Matteo's phone ring through the wall, heard his voice go cold and hard, then silence, heavy, ominous silence. 5 minutes later, he knocked on our connecting door. When I opened it, his face told me everything had changed. "Sergio has Lucas's second-in-command, Antonio. They're demanding I meet them at the old warehouse district tomorrow night." State and federal investigators cycled through with counsel present, questions clipped and professional. Nobody grand stood, nobody threatened me. They were building a case, not a spectacle. My stomach dropped. "It's a trap, obviously." He ran a hand through his hair, tension radiating from every line of his body. "But if I don't go, they'll execute Antonio on camera and send it to every family in the region. Show that I abandon my people. It'll start a feeding frenzy. Every rival thinking I'm weak, vulnerable. So you're going to walk into an ambush. I'm going prepared. Lucas is assembling the team now. We'll have contingencies, backup plans, escape routes." His jaw tightened. "But yes, there's a strong chance I won't come back from this." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been living in denial, pretending the danger existed somewhere distant. abstract. But this was real. Tomorrow night, Matteo might die. There has to be another way. There isn't. He stepped closer, cupped my face with both hands. I need you to listen carefully. In my study, there's a safe behind the painting of the harbor. The code is Sophia's birthday. Inside are documents, bank accounts, everything you and your sister would need if something happens to me. Lucas knows to ensure you're protected, but I wanted you to know where everything is. Stop. Tears burned behind my eyes. Stop talking like you're already dead. I'm being practical. You deserve to know you'll be taken care of, both of you, no matter what happens tomorrow. I don't want your money or your protection if you're not here. The admission tore out of me. I want you alive, Matteo. I want the future you promised. The one where we try this properly when the war is over. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. Then I'll do everything in my power to come back to you. He kissed me then, and I kissed him back with everything I had, all the fear and want and desperate hope pouring between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, something had shifted, a decision made without words. Stay with me tonight, he said quietly. Not forever. Not making promises we might not be able to keep. Just tonight. Let me hold you while I can. I should have said no. Should have maintained the boundaries we'd agreed on. But the thought of him facing death alone, of spending what might be our last night separated by a wall, was unbearable. Yes. His room was larger than mine, darker, dominated by a massive bed and windows overlooking the grounds. He locked the door behind us, a habitual security measure, then turned to face me. If you want to change your mind, I kissed him to shut him up, pouring 3 months of tension and longing into it. His arms came around me immediately, pulling me close, and suddenly we were stumbling toward the bed, frantic and tender, desperate and careful, making love like we were trying to memorize each other against the possibility of never having this chance again. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, his heartbeat steady under my ear. His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder blade, while I traced the scars on his ribs. Tell me something, I whispered. Something true that you've never told anyone. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I'm tired. So deeply tired of the violence and the strategy, and having to be ruthless every moment of every day. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to just be Matteo. Not the boss, not the heir to Giuseppe's legacy. Just a man who reads books and cares about the woman in his bed and doesn't have to calculate the consequences of showing weakness. You could be. When this is over, step back, let someone else lead. It doesn't work that way. I can make things better for the people who depend on me. More humane, less cruel, but I can never fully walk away, not without risking everything I've built, everyone I'm responsible for. His arm tightened around me. But with you, in moments like this, I get to remember who I might have been in a different life. I lifted my head to look at him. Promise me you'll be smart tomorrow. Not brave, not heroic, just smart and careful and focused on survival. I promise. He kissed my forehead, my nose, my lips. I have too much to come home to now. We made love again as dawn approached, slower this time, savoring every touch and kiss. When I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, wrapped in his arms, I tried not to think about how this might be the last time. Morning came too fast. Matteo left the bed quietly, dressed in the dark, tried not to wake me. But I was already awake, had been for the past hour, listening to his breathing and praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in. Be safe, I whispered. Always. A lie, but a beautiful one. The day dragged like torture. I went through the motions of work, cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, reorganizing supplies that were already organized. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Sophia called at noon. I almost didn't answer, afraid my voice would give everything away. Just checking in, she said cheerfully. You sound weird. Everything okay? Fine, just tired. Long week. You work too hard. Mr. Ricchetti should give you a break. If only she knew. I'll mention it to him. How's school? We talked for 20 minutes about her chemistry project, and the boy she maybe liked but wasn't sure about yet. Normal teenage concerns from a world that felt impossibly distant from mine. When we hung up, I sat on my bed holding the phone, wondering if I should have said more. Told her I loved her more explicitly, just in case. 8 o'clock came. Matteo and 6 of his men, including Lucas, left in 3 vehicles. I watched from my window as the convoy disappeared down the driveway, red taillights vanishing into darkness. Then there was nothing to do but wait. Ms. Castillo served dinner. I couldn't eat, couldn't do anything except pace my room while Dodger watched with concerned brown eyes. 9 o'clock passed. 10. By 11, I was sitting on the floor against my bed, phone clutched in my hand, willing it to ring. 11:30. Midnight. Nothing. At 12:40, my phone finally buzzed. Lucas's number. Hannah. His voice was strained, breathing labored. It went bad. Really bad. We're coming back, but I need you to be ready. Boss is hurt. I'm hurt. We need medical supplies standing by. How hurt? Just be ready. 5 minutes out. He disconnected before I could ask more. I bolted from my room, ran down to Ms. Castillo's quarters, pounded on her door until she answered in her nightgown, eyes sharp despite the late hour. They're coming back injured. We need the emergency medical kit, clean towels, everything. She didn't waste time with questions. Within 2 minutes, we had supplies spread across the kitchen table. I was trying to remember my emergency care training from veterinary school when I heard the vehicles roar up the driveway. 3 had left. 1 returned. I ran outside. The SUV doors were already opening. Lucas stumbled out, blood soaking his left side, but staying upright through sheer determination. Then Matteo emerged from the driver's side, moving stiffly, his own shirt dark with blood. Antonio? Ms. Castillo asked quietly. Matteo shook his head. They'd lost him. Lucas needs medical attention immediately, Matteo said, voice rough. Bullet went through his shoulder, possible internal damage. Ambulance. Can't risk it. Too many questions. We have a doctor on call, but he's 40 minutes away. Matteo looked at me. Hannah, you have medical training. Can you stabilize him until help arrives? I'd trained on animals, not humans. But anatomy was anatomy, and a sucking chest wound was a sucking chest wound regardless of species. Get him inside. Now. They half-carried Lucas to the kitchen, laid him on the table we'd just cleared. His face had gone gray, breathing shallow and rapid. Classic signs of shock. My hands moved on autopilot, everything I'd learned in school coming back. Applied pressure to the wound, checked for exit wound, found it. Through and through was better than bullet lodged inside. Packed both sides with gauze, created pressure bandages, elevated his legs to combat shock. Hannah. Lucas's voice was barely a whisper. Boss okay? I'm fine, Matteo said from beside me. But when I glanced at him, I saw blood seeping through his shirt at his left side. You're not fine. Sit down before you pass out. Lucas first. I can multitask. Sit. I used the voice that made Dodger obey immediately. To my shock, it worked on Matteo too. While monitoring Lucas's breathing and pulse, I had Matteo remove his shirt. Knife wound, deep but clean, along his ribs. Missed anything vital, but would need stitches. What happened? I asked while working, needing the distraction as much as the information. Ambush, like we expected, Matteo said through gritted teeth as I cleaned his wound. But bigger than anticipated. Sergio brought 15 men. We had 6. You're outnumbered and you still went. We had contingency plans. Explosives planted in the warehouse 2 days ago. Escape routes mapped. Backup positioned outside. His jaw tightened as I applied antiseptic. Antonio was already dead when we arrived. They'd executed him hours earlier. Just wanted us to walk into the trap. Lucas coughed, grimaced. Boss saved us. Turned the whole thing around. Not before you took a bullet for me, Matteo countered. That's my job. They fell silent. I finished bandaging Matteo's ribs, triple-checked Lucas's vitals. His breathing had stabilized slightly, color returning to his face. We might actually pull this off. The private doctor arrived 38 minutes later, took over Lucas's care with practiced efficiency. Mateo refused further treatment beyond the cleaning I'd already done, insisted on staying with Lucas until the doctor declared him stable. Finally, around 3 a.m, when Lucas was sleeping peacefully under sedation, and the doctor had left with instructions for care, Mateo found me sitting on the stairs outside the kitchen. Exhaustion had finally caught up with both of us. He sat beside me, our shoulders touching. "You saved his life tonight." The doctor said another 10 minutes and he would have bled out internally. I did what anyone with training would have done. "No." He turned to face me. "You stayed calm under pressure. Used skills you learned for animals on a human without hesitation. Put aside fear to do what needed to be done." His hand found mine. "You're remarkable, Hannah Reed. You came back." My voice broke. "You actually came back." "I promised you I would." I leaned against him, too tired for barriers or pretense. "What happened to Sergio?" "Dead, along with most of his people. The ones who survived are being questioned, but I don't expect them to know much. Sergio was always paranoid about information security." He paused. "It's over. The territorial dispute, the war, all of it. We won. At what cost?" "Too high. Always too high." He stood, offered me his hand. "Come on, we both need sleep." I let him lead me upstairs to his room. We collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, too exhausted for anything except holding each other while the adrenaline finally faded. "Ask me again," I whispered into the darkness, "about trying this properly." His arms tightened around me. "When you're ready. When we've both had time to process everything that happened tonight. When it's not just adrenaline and relief talking. I'm ready now. Ask me tomorrow. If you still feel the same way after a full night's sleep and the crisis has passed, then I'll know it's real." "Fair enough." I closed my eyes, listening to his heartbeat, and let myself believe in tomorrow. Morning light filtered through the curtains, softer than it had any right to be after such a brutal night. I woke tangled with Mateo, his arm heavy across my waist, his breathing deep and steady. For a moment I just watched him sleep. The lines of tension that usually marked his face had smoothed, making him look younger, almost peaceful. Then reality crashed back. Lucas recovering downstairs. 3 men dead. Sergio eliminated along with most of his organization. The war was over, but the cost had been staggering. Mateo's eyes opened, finding mine immediately. "You're still here. Where else would I be? I thought maybe you'd wake up and realize last night was a mistake. That sleeping with your boss who happens to run a criminal empire probably wasn't your best decision." I traced the bandage covering his ribs, careful not to press too hard. My best decisions don't seem to work out well for me. Maybe it's time I tried something different. Over the next week, the mansion settled into a strange new normal. Lucas recovered steadily, grumbling about being bedridden, but following doctor's orders when I threatened to tell Mateo he was being difficult. Federal agents came and went, asking questions about the warehouse incident. Mateo handled them with practiced ease, his lawyer present for every conversation, giving nothing away. The territorial disputes evaporated overnight. Sergio's death had created a power vacuum, but Mateo moved quickly to fill it, absorbing resources and establishing clear boundaries with neighboring families. No one wanted another war. Everyone was tired of the bloodshed. 8 days after the ambush, Mateo found me in the library. I'd been cataloging his collection, a project I'd started out of boredom and continued because I actually enjoyed it. Dodger slept at my feet, content in the afternoon sunlight. "Walk with me," Mateo said. Not a command, just an invitation. We walked through the gardens, past the spot where I'd witnessed that first execution all those weeks ago. The memory still made my stomach clench, but it felt distant now, like something that had happened to a different Hannah in a different life. "I have an offer for you," he began, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on the horizon. "Actually, more of a proposition, a way out if you want it." My heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "A house in Montana. Small town. Quiet. Far from all of this. $500,000 in an account under whatever name you choose. New identities for you and Sophia if you want them. All your debts already cleared. You could start fresh, both of you. Go back to school, finish your degree, live normal lives without looking over your shoulders." The offer was everything I'd dreamed of 3 months ago. Freedom. Safety. A clean break from the violence and danger. So why did it feel like he was ripping my heart out? You want me to leave? My voice came out flat. I want you to have a choice. He finally looked at me. One you didn't have before. I forced you into this arrangement. Used Sophia to ensure your compliance. That was wrong. Now I'm giving you the option I should have offered from the beginning. Stay or go. But make it because you want to, not because you're trapped. I stopped walking, turned to face him fully. And if I stay? What then? Then things change. You're not my employee anymore, not my housekeeper or my obligation. You become my partner in every sense that matters. I pay for you to finish veterinary school. We buy the property adjacent to this one, set up a proper sanctuary for rescued animals. You build your dream while I work on legitimizing more of my businesses. We try this relationship properly, openly, with Sophia's approval and blessing. You make it sound simple. It won't be. I'll still have enemies. There will always be danger in loving someone like me, but I'm working toward getting out, Hannah. Not tomorrow, not next month, but gradually. Transitioning to legal businesses, distancing myself from the worst of it. For you. For us. For any future we might build together. I wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to throw myself into his arms and accept everything he was offering. But Sophia's face flashed in my mind. My sister who'd already lost so much. Who deserved honesty about what staying with Matteo would mean. I need to talk to Sophia first. She deserves to know the truth before I make this decision. Relief washed across his features. Of course. Whatever you need. I'll arrange dinner here. Formal, the three of us. You can tell her as much or as little as you're comfortable with. 2 days later, Sophia sat across from me at Matteo's dining table, eyes wide as she took in the formal setting. Crystal glasses, fine china, the kind of meal reserved for important occasions. Matteo sat at the head of the table, relaxed but attentive, letting me lead the conversation. So this is fancy, Sophia said, trying for humor. But I could hear the nervousness underneath. Did someone die? No. I reached across to squeeze her hand. But we need to talk about some things. Important things. I told her an edited version of the truth. That Matteo's business dealings weren't always legal. That there had been territorial disputes that turned violent. That staying with him meant accepting a level of risk we'd never faced before. I didn't mention the execution I'd witnessed, or the attack on the mansion, or how close Matteo had come to dying a week ago. Those details would only terrify her without adding useful information. Throughout my explanation, Sophia listened with her sharp, assessing gaze. When I finished, she turned to Matteo. So you're basically a crime boss. He didn't flinch. In the ways that matter, yes, though I prefer to think of it as running a family business with unconventional methods. And you want to date my sister? I love your sister. There's a significant difference. Sophia sat back, processing. I held my breath, waiting for her reaction. She could demand we leave, could refuse to accept this relationship, could make this impossible in ways that would break my heart. What are you doing to keep Hannah safe? She finally asked. Matteo leaned forward. Everything in my power. Increased security, reduced my exposure to dangerous situations, working toward legitimizing my businesses so we can have a normal life. But I won't lie to you, Sophia. There's no guarantee. My enemies might target Hannah to get to me. That risk exists, and it's something we'll have to manage carefully. And what about me? Am I a target too? You already have protection you don't see. Men who follow you to and from school, watch your routes, ensure you're safe. I would never let harm come to you because of your connection to Hannah and me. You have my word on that. Sophia looked at me. You're really in love with him, aren't you? This isn't just about the money or feeling trapped. I love him, I admitted. The words feeling right despite everything. I know it's complicated and probably crazy. But yes, I want to stay. Want to build something with him. But only if you're okay with it. If you're not comfortable, we can take Matteo's offer and disappear to Montana. Start over somewhere safe. And you'd resent me forever for making you give this up. No, Hannah. She cut me off gently. You've been taking care of me since I was 11. Making sacrifices, working yourself to exhaustion, giving up your dreams so I could have mine. I see you now, with him. And you're different, lighter, happy in a way I haven't seen since before Mom and Dad died. She turned back to Mateo. If you hurt her, I will make it my life's mission to destroy you. I don't care how powerful you are or how many people you have. I'll find a way. Mateo's lips quirked. I believe you would. And for what it's worth, I have no intention of hurting her. She's the best thing that's happened to me in longer than I care to admit. Good. Sophia picked up her fork, apparently satisfied. Then I guess you're stuck with both of us. Fair warning, I'm planning to go to MIT for engineering, and that's not cheap. The tension broke as Mateo laughed, genuine and warm. I think we can manage that. That night, after Sophia had gone home with promises to visit next weekend, I found Mateo on his balcony. He pulled me against his chest, arms wrapping around my waist. So, that's it then, he said softly. You're staying. I'm staying. Partner, not employee. Equal in this relationship, even if our bank accounts never match. Partners, he agreed, which means you get a say in decisions, including this one. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folder. Applications for veterinary programs. Columbia, Cornell, University of Pennsylvania. All within driving distance. All with excellent reputations. Pick whichever one you want, and I'll make sure you get in. I took the folder. Emotion clogging my throat. You already contacted them? Made some calls, yes. Turns out having resources and connections can be useful for things beyond criminal enterprises. His hand cupped my face. I meant what I said, Hannah. I want you to have your dream. The career you sacrificed for Sophia. The life you deserved to have before everything fell apart. Let me give that back to you. I kissed him instead of answering, pouring 3 months of fear and hope and desperate love into it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. One more thing, he murmured. The property adjacent to this one. I bought it yesterday. 20 acres, mostly wooded, with existing structures that can be converted. I was thinking we could start bringing in animals by spring, build something together, yours and mine. You're moving very fast. I've wasted enough time being alone. Now that I have you, I'm not interested in taking things slow. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Unless you want slow. Tell me what you need, and I'll give it to you. What I needed was this. Him. Us. The impossible future we were building together despite every logical reason to walk away. I need you to kiss me again. He did. And for the first time since I'd walked through his gates as a desperate woman trying to save her sister, I felt truly free. Free to choose, free to love, free to build something beautiful from the ashes of violence and fear. The war was over. The future was ours. 6 months changed everything. Columbia University's veterinary program accepted me for the spring semester. Mateo drove me to campus on my first day, waited in the parking lot reading while I sat through orientation, then took me to dinner to celebrate. He didn't make a big production of it, didn't treat me like I was fragile or needed protecting from the challenge ahead. Just asked questions about my professors and what I'd learned, genuinely interested in this part of my life that had nothing to do with his world. The commute became routine. 3 days a week, I'd leave the mansion at dawn, spend hours in lectures and labs, return exhausted but exhilarated. On the days I wasn't in class, I worked on the animal sanctuary taking shape on the adjacent property. We'd started with the 3 dogs beyond Dodger, then added 2 cats rescued from a hoarding situation, then a horse too old for racing that would have been put down if we hadn't intervened. Mateo hired contractors to convert the existing barn into proper kennels and stalls, installed climate control and medical facilities that rivaled some actual veterinary clinics. When I protested the expense, he just kissed my forehead and said, "Consider it an investment in your future practice." Lucas recovered fully by week 21, exactly as the doctor predicted. The bullet had done damage but nothing permanent, and he approached physical therapy with the same grim determination he applied to everything else. By the time he was cleared for duty, something had shifted in him. He was still Mateo's right hand, still handled security and sensitive operations, but he'd also appointed himself unofficial guardian of Sophia and me. You saved my life, he told me one afternoon while helping repair a fence on the sanctuary property. That means something in my world. Means I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. But I can make sure nothing ever happens to you or your sister. You don't owe me anything. With respect, Hannah, that's not how this works. You're family now, and family takes care of family. Sophia visited every weekend, sometimes staying the entire 2 days in one of the guest suites. She and Matteo had developed an easy rapport built on mutual respect and her complete inability to be intimidated by him. I'd catch them in the library, him helping her with calculus homework, or in the kitchen where he was teaching her to make proper Italian pasta from scratch. Your boyfriend is actually kind of cool, she admitted one Saturday night, while we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. Like scary, and probably has done terrible things, but also really smart, and he clearly worships you. He doesn't worship me. Hannah, he bought you an entire animal sanctuary and is paying for veterinary school. The man built you a custom clinic on 20 acres of prime real estate. That's worship. I couldn't argue with that assessment. Matteo's business operations shifted gradually but noticeably. He divested from the more dangerous enterprises, stepped back from anything involving drugs or weapons trafficking, focused instead on the restaurants, the import business, real estate development. Still skirted the edges of legality in places, still had connections to people I'd rather not think about, but he was trying, making an effort to build something we could both live with. The mansion felt different too, less like a fortress, more like a home. Staff moved with less tension. Guards remained but became less visible. Matteo laughed more, the sound becoming familiar rather than shocking. We'd have dinners together, just the two of us, where we talked about mundane things like what color to paint the sanctuary's reception area, or whether we should get chickens. Normal couple problems. Normal relationship discussions. As normal as anything could be when one half of the couple ran a criminal empire. Week 24 brought unexpected snow, rare for our region. I woke to find the grounds covered in white, pristine and beautiful. Matteo was already up, standing at the window with coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the snow in shades of pink and gold. Come here, he said, without turning. I wrapped myself in his robe and joined him, his arm coming around my waist automatically. We stood in comfortable silence, just breathing together, watching the world transform. I have something to show you, he said eventually. Get dressed. Warm clothes. 20 minutes later, we were walking across the snowy grounds to the sanctuary. The barn looked picturesque, covered in snow, like something from a Christmas card. But Matteo led me past it, to the smaller building we'd been renovating for the past month. The sign above the door was new, installed sometime yesterday without my knowledge. Reed Veterinary Clinic. Below it in smaller letters, Hannah Reed, DVM. I don't graduate for another 1.5 years, I protested, voice thick with emotion. I know, but the clinic will be ready when you are. He handed me a key, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. The deed. The building, the land, the equipment. All in your name. Not mine, yours. Whatever happens between us, this is yours to keep. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Sure enough, the property deed listed me as sole owner. No conditions, no strings attached. Just his name in the seller line, and mine as buyer. Why? Because you deserve something that's entirely yours, that you built with your own hands and your own dreams. He turned me to face him, hands gentle on my shoulders. I forced you into this life initially. Gave you no choice about staying. This is me giving you that choice now. Every single day. You have your own career, your own property, your own income once you start practicing. If you ever want to leave, you can, and you'll have everything you need to thrive without me. Tears froze on my cheeks in the cold air. You're trying to make it easier for me to walk away? I'm trying to make sure you stay because you want to, not because you need to. There's a difference, Hannah. A crucial one. I kissed him instead of answering, pouring 6 months of love and gratitude and hope into it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I rested my forehead against his. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home now. You're my home. Even knowing what I am? What I've done? Especially knowing. Because I also know who you're trying to become. The man who pays for orphanages and treats his people with respect. Who helps a 16-year-old girl with homework and teaches her to make pasta. Who built an entire sanctuary because his girlfriend loves animals. I pulled back to meet his eyes. I see all of you, Matteo. The darkness and the light. And I choose all of it. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that still felt like a gift every time. Then I have one more question to ask you. He pulled another envelope from his jacket, this one smaller. Inside was a simple card with a date and time written in his precise handwriting. 3 months from now. What's this? A reservation at the courthouse. For a wedding, if you'll have me. He cupped my face in both hands. I'm not doing grand romantic gestures or public proposals. I'm asking quietly, just you and me, if you want to build this life together officially. Partners in everything. Marry me, Hannah. I'd imagined this moment differently. Thought there would be more fear, more hesitation, more weighing of consequences. But standing in the snow outside the clinic that bore my name, looking at the man who'd started as my captor and become my partner, I felt nothing but certainty. Yes, absolutely yes. He kissed me again, and for the first time since I'd grabbed that vase and deliberately shattered it all those months ago, I felt truly free. Free to choose, free to love, free to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of where we'd started. That evening, Sophia video called from her friend's house where she was studying. Matteo and I told her together, my hand in his as we explained the proposal and the wedding plans. Finally, she said, grinning at the screen. I was wondering when you'd make it official. Can I be maid of honor? Obviously. And can we have a real party afterward? Not just courthouse signatures. Like actual celebration with cake and music and me getting to dress up. Matteo laughed. Whatever you want, Sophia. This is your family too. After we hung up, I turned to him. Our family. That's what she said. Our family. That's what we are. He pulled me into his lap, arms secure around my waist. You, me, Sophia, Lucas, even Dodger and all the animals you keep rescuing. We built this together from nothing, from fear and desperation and impossible circumstances. And somehow, we made it into something worth keeping. 3 months later, we stood in that courthouse with Sophia beside me and Lucas beside Matteo. The ceremony took 12 minutes. The judge who married us had no idea who Matteo was, what he did, the blood on his hands that no amount of legitimacy would ever fully wash clean. She just saw 2 people making promises to each other, building a future on hope and hard-won trust. The party afterward filled the mansion grounds with people from every part of our complicated lives. Staff who'd become friends. Business associates who'd become something like family. Sophia's classmates who thought they were just attending a really fancy wedding at a really nice house. The veterinary students who'd become my study group. All of them mixing together, creating something new from disparate pieces. I danced with Matteo under string lights in the garden, where I'd once witnessed him commit murder. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. No regrets? He asked, as we swayed to music drifting from the house. Only that it took me so long to stop trying to get fired. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Best failed sabotage attempt I've ever witnessed. Give me some credit. I was very thorough. You were terrible at it. I knew what you were doing from day one. Then why did you let me keep trying? His expression softened, turning serious. Because watching you fight for your freedom, even when you had none, reminded me why I fell into this life in the first place. You don't give up. You don't surrender. You find a way forward no matter how impossible the odds. He pulled me closer. You made me want to be worthy of that kind of strength. You already were. You just needed someone to see it. We danced until the stars came out, until the guests began to leave, until it was just us and the future we'd chosen together. Not perfect, not simple, but ours, built on honesty and sacrifice, and the kind of love that survives impossible beginnings. Later, much later, I stood on our balcony watching the last cars disappear down the driveway. Matteo joined me, wrapping a blanket around both our shoulders against the autumn chill. No more running, I said quietly. No more hiding. He agreed. And for the first time since I'd signed that contract months ago, I truly meant it. This was where I belonged. Where we both belonged. Together in the life we'd fought so hard to build from the ashes of where we'd started. The maid who'd tried to get fired on purpose had found something better than escape. She'd found home.